Welcome to the Crap and the Crazy with Tash Critter. Tash owns Little Wooden Toy Box and is mother of 2 teens, both with autism, ADHD and PDA. 10 years in early intervention, working with the kids' OTs, speechies and psychologists has given Tash unique insight into understanding difficult behaviours and why they occur, as well as understanding how emotional regulation and sensory input impacts us and our behaviour. This insight has helped Tash design and implement resources and coping strategies to make home life calmer and more organised. Join Tash as she talks about day-to-day life with autism, the sucky bits and the wins, plus tips for enjoying life despite the challenges.
Hello, welcome to today's podcast. I've titled this one, What No One Sees. So there's not really any useful strategies in this. It's more a mental health one as a parent, more focused on the sucky bits and how autism can look behind the scenes, and also to recognize that sometimes you can't fix it, and that's okay, and it's okay to not be okay as well. So in this one I wanted to go through, I've said before, my boy used to just scream and scream and scream, and 3 hours was an average kind of time to scream, and daily and repeatedly daily as well. And so I was wondering whether I should actually talk about this or not. But look, there's going to be other people out there going through this, and I remember just feeling so alone, and also not realizing that it wasn't normal because you're so stuck in it, you're so sleep deprived, you've got someone screaming at you all the time, and combine that with no sleep, and you're not really processing like a normal person. So my boy, the only place I could keep him safe when he was probably around 4 years old then, and also give myself a break and not be screamed at in my face, because I couldn't actually fix it, I couldn't stop the screaming, and I don't know why. I guess I didn't have tools and strategies back then, so this was probably before I knew about applying that deep pressure, that proprioception. So I used to put him in the garage, and I know how awful that sounds, and that's by no means this is a way to deal with it. You are going to deal with your kid differently depending on what you can cope with as well. When he was really little, I remember the health nurse or someone at Nagala, because we got in there as well, and they just told me he didn't have an off switch, sent us home again, which thank you, but yeah, anyway. But they said, like, when they're really little, put them in a safe space, which was a cot for him, close the door, so like he was completely safe, everything was fine, go get a tea. And I used to sit out in the backyard, and that was my 3 minutes break, I suppose, just to reset and then to go back into that situation. But years and years of that on top of each other, and then your kid gets bigger, and then the safe space kind of, when they get bigger and they've got adrenaline going as well, the garage door was the only thing, because that's a solid door, as opposed to the doors inside your house, which you can punch through, which we haven't actually had. But that garage door was a solid door, and my kid didn't smash things up, so I didn't have to worry about the car. I know friends who've got kids similar, and they couldn't do that because their kid would just destroy the car and everything in there. My boy would stand there, so he would do the tin soldier and scream and scream and scream till he threw up, and I would be on the other side of the door. But it was just a coping strategy for me when I knew there wasn't a single thing I could do to help him, at least at that point. With what I knew, I couldn't help him. So yeah, that's something I used to do. And then I'm thinking, look, is that child abuse or not? And then another story along those lines, which, no, I don't think that's child abuse. That was the best way I could cope. No one else could help me. No one else knew what to do. And like I said, we'd been through the Nagala process. I think he'd been diagnosed by this point. So it was, you get a diagnosis and a label and you can research and whatnot, but that doesn't actually help you through these meltdowns, which is why hopefully listening to this and then some of the strategies that we've got in the emotional regulation pack will help you too, if this sounds familiar and you're at this point and have no clue what to do. But back then, no one could help. We had started going to early intervention probably soon after this point, and that's still only 45 minutes where you're not getting your whole life story, how it looks all behind the scenes, until sometimes years down the track, and then you're collecting little bits of information, but when you're working with therapists, they've got their goals, and that doesn't necessarily help you, or you're not getting across all these strategies for home life. Does that make sense? Anyway, I was going to go back to this was probably the worst thing that, I don't know, as a parent I did, I suppose. And again, not knowing, that's what the stupid book said. This is another thing. You can research and then you can think you're doing the right thing because the book says you should do this, then you try this and you're like, that really wasn't the right thing for us. So again, I hope this just helps as far as, you know, you can take bits and pieces, but they're not necessarily going to work for you or right for your situation, or they may work for a neurotypical kid and they're just not working for yours. So again, here when I was I'm not going to say who it was, but when I was reading this book, I don't think my boy was diagnosed at this point. So I didn't know I was dealing with autism and therefore things would be different. Yes. So this book said that, you know, if your kid at bedtime dropped the toy, so this is out of the cot, so he must have been around 2 or 3 years old. If your kid dropped the toy outside of the cot and then started screaming and carrying on and not sleeping, they were just manipulating you. Yeah. So this was a sleep strategies book. So I'm like, right, I've tried everything else. I used to sleep on the floor with my hand in the cot, and that's the only way he would go to sleep. And this would be 2 to 4 hours every night. So I just slept on the carpet with my hand in the cot, and that's how he got to sleep, at least at some point that worked. So I tried this thing because we're trying to get him to sleep independently. I don't know whether I was pregnant at the time with my girl, but you know, that's kind of a life goal for your kid to sleep at some point. And this was nighttime sleeps. Day sleeps we'd just given up on by this point. So he had his favorite teddy, Jack. This poor Jack, he hasn't got any ears or tail anymore, but he's being put in a special box. My boy's now older, but we've kept Jack. There's lots of stories around Jack. I could do a whole podcast around that. Anyway, so I'm trying this sleep strategy, yeah? And so this book said, I think it was, you just wait it out till your kid has a 20-second, 45-second break from screaming or whatever. You go in, lay them down again, then close the door, walk out, close the door would make more sense. Something like this. Yes, I have not read this book. I do not want to read this book, but probably for the last 10 years, but it was something along these lines. So I'm like, right, we'll try it. So I sat outside my boy's door for 45 minutes and there was not even a 10-second gap in his screaming, like blood curdling screaming. Yes, which I now realize autism screaming is probably different from baby pissed off doesn't want to sleep screaming. Yeah. So knowing now the difference between a meltdown and a kid just procrastinating on sleep. Again, not a sleep expert. This is my 2 cents worth, my experience. So yeah, he was screaming for that long and I'm like, this is ridiculous at around the 45 minute mark. So I went in there. Sure enough, he'd thrown his teddy out. That's what he was screaming about. This has gone way beyond a tantrum. This is full-blown meltdown by this point. What I didn't realize, while he's been screaming, the screaming was so loud. I was a meter, 2 meters away on the other side of the door. So I never left him, but he didn't know that. He'd been bashing his knees against the cot. His knees were black, but I didn't hear it because the screaming was so loud. And that's probably the worst thing I've done as a parent, not with any abuse or neglect or any of those. Like, my intentions were good. I was just trying what this stupid book said. So also to just acknowledge, I don't know, as a parent, you don't have the answers. Your kid doesn't come with a manual. And a lot of parenting is trial and error. Now, if I had have done that again, for me, I would call that child abuse or neglect. That only happened once. And that poor kid, he was so knackered. As soon as I realized, I picked him up, hugged him, gave him back his teddy bear, laid him down, and he fell straight to sleep, which I don't think he's ever done before that or since then. He was exhausted. And yeah, not cool with that style of parenting. That book, don't know what happened to that book, but yeah, I don't think I opened it again. Another one, oh no, that was the same book. It said that if your kids, which I remember talking to one of my best friends about this, if your kid poops once you put them down to sleep, that was just another manipulation or procrastination method. And I'm like, but your kid, especially if you've got a anxious or highly wired kid, when they stop and slow down and you take away all the, the sensory and environmental stimuli, then isn't it possible that their bodies would relax and then they would poop? And that's actually got nothing to do with manipulation or control or any of those things that the book said. Anyway, I just wanted to say that in case that helps anyone at all, if you can relate. Another couple of stories I had, which are sort of on topic as far as, you know, especially when you've got kids that are considered high functioning, which again, I'll do another podcast about that because there's a lot of misconception around that. But my kids look normal. They look neurotypical. Therefore, the expectations for their behavior and, you know, homework and study and social and all of those things are much higher as you would expect for neurotypical kids. But my kids have got to work that much harder to maintain that, and then they're exhausted, then they've got all the sensory overwhelm and whatever else, and you know, they can hold themselves together for school, but they come home and they are knackered, they're exhausted, we've got the meltdowns, we've got the behaviors and everything else because they've focused so much on keeping themselves together at school, that they just have nothing left to give once they get home. And that's not neurotypical, that's not normal. And, you know, homework, just had to bring up homework. And, you know, my background, I was a teacher. And, sorry, before we go on to the homework, I'll go back a bit earlier in years. You know, I read the book, I think Mem Fox, I love her books. And she's written a book about reading with your toddlers. And I wanted to read with my toddlers. And my boy, you know, again, parenting expectations, my boy was not up for being read to. So I had all these beautiful books to read to him, and I would start reading and he would come over, close the book, sit on the book, and just, I was not allowed to read to him. He probably didn't like the sound of my voice. Yeah, he just would not be read to, refused to. And I'd looked after over 20 families with kids with different disabilities, different needs, and, you know, looking after these families as well as babysitting and whatever else up until the age I had my kids. And you read before you put your kids to bed. Yeah, you read with them, you read books and you interacted with them. There was none of that with my kids. And yeah, they just did not like books. They did not like reading. It just, yeah. My boy did love Dr. Seuss and the Harry McClary books. So rhyming, that were the two sets of books that I could read, and nothing else he was interested in. But anyway, moving forward to homework, you're supposed to be doing your readers with your kids in, I don't know, kindy, prep, year one. My boy would sit there and punch his head. He would just be so upset with, firstly, he didn't want to do it. And then the expectations around that, I suppose, as well. You're supposed to do your homework. And then he struggles that much more with comprehension and the skills required for reading, I guess. And yeah, the anger, the anxiety, all of that just came out as punching himself in the head, which, this is ridiculous. Why do we do this? So we didn't. And look, I'm getting the other end of that now in high school and doesn't do homework, but yeah, kind of more important things. I guess that's been my thing as well. Like, I've, instead of academic, because yeah, I haven't produced rocket scientists, I want their confidence. I want their confidence in place and social. And when it does take so much more energy for them to keep up that social life, as well as everything else going on school, yeah, it's really been the social and life skills. You could be the smartest kid on the planet, but if you don't have life skills, then once you leave school, once that routine's gone, what do you have left? Anyway, sorry, I'm prattling here and I've gone over a range of different things. I'm going to stop now before, who knows where I'll go on to next. Yeah, I will talk to you soon in the next episode. Bye.